Welcome back. The Public Service Commission's research had also revealed that there was disparity between resources available at police stations and records thereof at headquarters. The head of General Crime Investigations at SAPS, Major General Charles Johnson, said steps had been taken to improve the effectiveness of detectives. He said a crime scene investigation manual as well as a crime investigation manual had been developed to guide investigators. He added that steps had also been developed for the handling of court dockets.
The intention is to provide investigating officers and police officers with a step-by-step guide on how to conduct crime scene investigation, and on specific for investigation officers on how to conduct investigation in specific crimes. These manuals are currently available on our intranet. We intend, with the availability of funds, to print these manuals in booklet and to make it available to all officers. We have, in order to streamline and the court dockets, we have placed detective court officers at 116 identified courts across the country. The function of these people is to screen court dockets for completeness and to ensure the speedy finalization of investigations of court dockets. We have established 24-hour, 7 days a week detective service at 338 police stations across the country. The purpose of this is to have a detective available on 24 hours, 7 days a week to deal with newly reported cases. That is the obtaining of statement, interviewing of complainants, witnesses, and dealing with the crime scenes.
The General said a particular challenge to the detective services was the high volumes of cases on the court roll.
We are challenged by withdrawal of cases by complainants, especially domestic violence related cases and our sexual offences cases. We have a challenge with the finalization of the stock theft related legislation, especially the Identification of Animal Act and the Pounds Bill. Then we have this backlog at the Department of Health with toxicology, histology analysis. Then we are losing experienced detectives, and this results in a heavy workload, and then that it also relates to shortages and heavy caseloads. We are in the process, through the Office of the Deputy National Commissioner Crime Detection, General Labia, dealing with a retention strategy and career pathing of detectives that will be tabled before the National Management Forum for discussion and approval. Thanks.
Advocate Pieter, Chief Director of Court Services at the Department of Justice, told the dialogue that if there were no detectives, the courts simply would not function. But there was some good news too. Randt said problems revealed by the Cabinet review of the criminal justice system had addressed systemic weaknesses. It had led to the improvement of the integrated management system.
At this point in time, we've got 20 courts that are fully connected to 99 police stations, where electronic information is being shared from the police and the CAS systems directly to the prosecutors, and the outcomes are shared back to the police. So that's where we are moving, and that type of integration is starting to happen, and it's been rolled out, and it is starting to make a difference on the ground. I think what we need to look at is that where we previously had case flow management that wasn't dealt with properly, police and the detectives are now part and parcel of case flow management. They deal with helping to reduce case cycle times by focusing on the long outstanding cases. On a monthly basis, we get lists from correctional services in terms of all the long outstanding cases longer than 24 months. That list is circulated to the detectives, to the prosecuting authority, to all role players in the criminal justice system, so that we can focus and see whether we can't speed up those cases and deal with it. So it's that type of change that has come about as a result of the review initiatives.
Advocate Bradley Smith of the National Prosecuting Authority said despite all the challenges facing detectives, there were also some success stories. He warned, however, that more training was needed.
If it is the year of the detective, there must be significantly more training applied to detectives. Dealing with juveniles, child justice legislation has proved to be an area of weakness. Drafting of affidavits, you've already heard the challenges. If an affidavit isn't drafted right, then a second affidavit is often taken. Then quite often you get contradictions between the two affidavits, and that leads to an unsuccessful outcome quite often in court. Illegible statements, simple handwriting skills. And this is going to be a growing issue because of one particular aspect. There's an increasing number of foreigners, and that means that the people who take the A1 statement right at the beginning don't have the capacity. They need somebody else to come in and translate what the complainant is saying. So this A1 statement, the first statement, the investigation is going to be hampered the more foreigners we have in the country.
One of the weaknesses revealed by the review of the criminal justice system was the assigning of dockets to ill-experienced investigators on duty during weekends.
Quite often that's not the person with the appropriate experience. Even if the person's on duty on the weekend, that docket should be reassigned to the person who's got the experience appropriate for that particular investigation. Just general successes, you've heard some of them. The greater national leadership and collaboration is paying dividends. There are definitely improvements in investigations. There's less withdrawals each year. And definitely monitoring of cases is improving. It's a gradual change. It will take time. You don't get experience through book learning, but it's through practice.
The DA Shadow Minister for Police, Dianne Kohler-Barnard, said the positive presentations at the detective dialogue had left her confused and did not speak to the observations of the Portfolio Committee.
We look at it, if we look at it practically, and I mean we have to look, for example, at the TV coverage of the killings at Marikana. We saw police picking up weapons of various descriptions with their bare hands and piling them in, dumping them in piles. So basically what I saw in front of me was the rape of a crime scene. Masked fingerprints that will now make the job of General Shezi, or what a title is these days, desperately difficult. We saw what I believe was the inevitable outcome of a huge lack of training. We've observed it firsthand. Means our labs are now given almost an impossible task of sifting through the evidence because the actual evidence has been contaminated. But this seems to be a normal occurrence at crime scenes.
The acting chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police and host of the dialogue, Annelies van Wyk, still had a major concern about the lack of clarity on the exact number of detectives. She said in May this year, SAPS indicated that they had 20,958 detectives, almost 5,000 short of the ideal figure.
There was a time where SAPS had more than 26,000 detectives. And it's in the Auditor General's report as well that there's contradictions in terms of the number of detectives that SAPS have. Now, if we don't know how many people we have, how do we start planning in terms of training? How do we start moving forward? And I think one of the issues that's still outstanding and that I would like SAPS specifically to respond to is, and I know that the criminal justice revamp also had an ideal figure. If I remember correctly, your ideal figure was 33,000. And I would like to find out from SAPS, how did you determine this 26,000? Or was it a question of what sounds like a nice figure? Because we need to start knowing what we are working with. We don't.
Ms. van Wyk also disagreed with the Department of Justice about the successes of the criminal justice system. According to the department, the e-docket system was rolled out at 99 stations. But according to SAPS, they plan to roll out the e-docket system at only 20 stations.
And I think this highlights, and I'm raising these issues because it highlights the problem that as a committee we also deal with, that we do not have reliable information. Information keeps on changing, and that's ridiculous. It's wasting your time, it's wasting our time, and more than that, it's wasting the taxpayers' monies. And it's wasting people's lives. We need to get exact figures around these things. Last thing is that what concerns me, and specifically while we've got the Justice Department here as well, is too often we still arrive at police stations and we would find detainees there that have been in the police cell, not in correctional services brought to the police cell for a court appearance, have been in the police cell for up to 5 years. Now, everybody has spoken about the Constitution, etc., etc., and I can name you the police stations as well. Then you check the J8, you check it. And the magistrate has referred that person not back to the correctional services facilities, but back to the police stations. Now that for us is really also a concern, because it indicates also a lack of detection, but it also, if you look at the broader criminal justice systems, it speaks about why is it necessary, why is the magistrate allowing that a case carries on for so long as well.
Mr. Ndlovu of the Inkatha Freedom Party also had a problem with people spending a long time in prison without being charged. He also had a concern about how cases were monitored.
There are around about more than 2,700 people who are in jail, who are in custody, but their cases have never been tried. Is there any coordination between these departments? That's the first question. The second question is this: if you say that people are being, there is a monitoring of cases, who does that? And when does that happen? Because people are sitting in jail as we speak now, and there is nobody who tells their friends or their relatives what is happening. And those people are supposed to be in court, and they are not released. What happens? Who's supposed to do that?
We will have more coverage of the dialogue on detectives on the portfolio Committee on Police in tomorrow morning's program. We'll also bring you some of the outcomes of this one-day indaba. After the break, we hear what government is doing to bring an end to violent protests around the country. Please stay with us. Welcome back. We begin with a recap on a question to Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe, which we touched on in our program on Wednesday morning. He was asked by COPE's leader, Nhlengethwa, when government was going to engage with communities to stop violent protests. In his supplementary question, Mr. Nhlengethwa said the political reasons for the protests were well known. Therefore, he wanted to know how government was going to change the situation. We pick up with the Deputy President's reply that it should be recognized that more incidents of corruption were now being reported.
The instruments, legislative and otherwise, the agencies that have been established to root out corruption have teeth and are on an ongoing basis dealing with corruption. The participation of members of the community as whistleblowers is very impressive, and that is why we're getting all these reports about acts of corruption coming out in the open. It's because we are steadily making progress. More people are participating in ensuring that those that act corruptly are brought to book.
Deputy President Motlanthe added that there was commitment on the part of the government as well as the presidency to ensure that any acts of corruption were eliminated.
It takes more than just the institutions, agencies and laws to root out corruption, because corruption or corrupt acts are committed when there is a collusion between those inside of government and those outside of government to manipulate processes. And that is why it is so important to support the instruments that are in place to continue eliminating acts of corruption.
Mr. Pieter Smith of the Inkatha Freedom Party had the first follow-up question. He wanted to know if government actually knew how people on the ground felt and how they would respond.
You know the expression, there's no smoke without fire. It seems to us that very often government seems to be caught by surprise when things go wrong. People are very angry, but it's only when the smoke is billowing and yet another building has been burnt down or another councillor's house has gone or another crisis has occurred that government realizes, in fact, how people really feel about things and how bad things are. So my questions to you are twofold. One, does government actually have a pulse on the mood of the nation? Does it know how people feel? And secondly, has government got a plan to be more proactive in anticipating how people are going to react, as opposed to just wading in afterwards and shooting from the hip?
Government can only be effective to the extent that it is held accountable by an active citizenship. So once the citizenry is active as whistleblowers, public representatives, raising issues in the House and other public platforms, then government would be held accountable. As I said, there is indeed room for improvement, because there are all these structures. I mean, we have constituency offices, we have community development workers, and so on. All of these are located within communities. And so, if...
Well, thank you for watching. View from the House returns same time, same place tomorrow morning. From us, goodbye.